There's a sickness quietly spreading in men, a sickness disguised as virtue. You see it in the lowered heads, the nervous laughter, the eagerness to please. You hear it in the constant apologies, the silence when boundaries are crossed, the desperate need to be liked. It's not kindness, it's fear. It's the need to be accepted at any cost, and that need, that's the leash. You were taught that loyalty is a strength, that obedience makes you good, that being harmless will protect you. But Machiavelli saw something far more dangerous than cruelty. He saw the man who forgets how to choose, the man who becomes the dog, who waits to be told, who wags his tail at praise and withers under criticism, who trades his power for peace and calls it nobility. This man does not command respect. He earns pity, and pity never leads, it only follows. Because in the real world, in the court, the battlefield, the boardroom, or even your most private relationships, power is not granted to those who obey. It's taken by those who dare to move without permission. The dog is trained, useful, loyal, but ultimately replaceable. Machiavelli didn't write for the harmless. He wrote for those willing to evolve, for the man who is tired of begging, tired of folding, tired of being overlooked, stepped on, or thrown scraps and pretending it's a feast. You're not here to be liked. You're here to rise, and to do that you have to kill the weak dog in you, not to become cruel, but to become sovereign. Because the wolf doesn't chase affection. He doesn't bark to be heard. He moves with precision, with silence, with power. So today we strip off the leash. We shatter the illusion that obedience will save you, and we begin the journey back to what you were always meant to be. You don't need anyone's approval to rise. You only need the courage to let the wolf wake up. Part 1. The dog was never free. You were praised for being obedient, told you were a good man for not making waves, taught that if you stayed loyal, stayed quiet, stayed soft, you'd be safe. You were raised to serve, and you didn't even know it. That's the most dangerous kind of prison, the one that disguises itself as virtue. The dog doesn't know it's caged. That's what makes it tragic. It believes it is loved, when in reality, it is simply tolerated. Fed when convenient, praised when useful, punished the moment it dares to resist. And if you've spent most of your life chasing approval, avoiding conflict, saying yes when you meant no, then you've been walking the world with that leash around your neck too. The man who does not value himself cannot command the respect of others. That's not Machiavelli. That's from the Stoic Epictetus. And it holds true today, as much as it did 2,000 years ago. Because when you live like the dog, waiting for permission, seeking validation, you surrender your ability to lead, to decide, to walk your own path. Let me be clear. Obedience is not strength. Harmlessness is not virtue. If your goodness depends on being liked, it's not goodness. It's fear. And fear disguised as morality is one of the most effective forms of control ever created. The dog obeys not because it loves, but because it has forgotten how to choose. It has been rewarded for submission and punished for instinct. And over time, it trades those instincts for safety. It stops thinking for itself. It stops resisting. It becomes predictable, easy to manage, and ultimately easy to discard. How often have you bit your tongue when you knew you should have spoken? How many times have you allowed your values to be stepped on because you feared rejection? That is not nobility. That is dependence. That is the cost of living like the dog. Think of the man who's always agreeable, always polite, always smiling through disrespect. The world doesn't admire him, it uses him. And when his usefulness ends, he is quietly replaced. Because here's the brutal truth. The agreeable man is forgettable. The dangerous man is remembered. There is a reason Machiavelli never praised the loyal servant. He praised the cunning ruler, the sovereign mind, the one who doesn't wag his tail, but sharpens his vision. Because in the arenas of politics, business, even relationships, what wins is not noise, but power. Not begging, but presence. To walk the world like the dog is to need others more than you need yourself. And that imbalance, that's your leash. You wait for praise. You wait for affection. You wait to be called forward. And all the while, the wolf waits too. But not for permission. The wolf is not reckless. He is restrained. But he is free. So ask yourself this. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when no one claps for your decisions? No one rewards your discipline. No one praises your strength. If the answer is, I don't know, then the dog still lives in you. But that can change. The moment you stop needing permission, the moment you start moving on your own terms, that's the beginning of something new, something ancient. The rise of the wolf within. Because the dog was never free, but you. You were born for more than obedience. You were born to lead yourself. And the world doesn't need another man who waits to be chosen. It needs one who remembers he was never meant to kneel. Part 2. Obedience is expected, not rewarded. You were taught to follow the rules, to nod, smile, comply. And somewhere along the way, you were told that if you did all of that, if you played the game right, there would be a reward, that someone would clap for your sacrifice, that your loyalty would earn you a seat at the table. But that reward never came, did it? Because in this world, obedience is not honored, it's assumed. You do what's expected and the world barely notices. But the moment you hesitate to follow, the moment you question the system, that's when the backlash hits. That's when silence turns to scorn. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've dared to act as if your loyalty is optional. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Machiavelli wasn't cruel. He was clear. He understood human nature better than most. When obedience becomes predictable, it becomes invisible. You become background noise, useful but not valued, present but never remembered. You think they'll thank you for being dependable, but in reality, the moment you stop complying, you're replaced. This is the trap of the agreeable man. He believes that if he keeps everyone happy, he will be kept safe. But safety bought through silence is fragile. It exists only as long as you're convenient. Let me ask you something. How many times have you said yes when everything inside you screamed no? How many times have you stayed quiet just to keep the peace, only to find yourself dismissed, ignored, stepped over? That's not peace. That's erasure. In truth, the man who obeys without question becomes forgettable. Not because he lacks value, but because he's made it too easy to be taken for granted. Think of the dog who sits, stays, obeys. At first he's praised, but over time his obedience is no longer impressive. It's expected. He's not admired for it. He's punished the moment he fails to deliver. There's no medal for being loyal too long. Only a shorter leash. You are not meant to live at the mercy of those who see your silence as compliance. And yet, many do. They smile as you serve, applaud your sacrifice, but only because your obedience serves their needs. The second it doesn't, they turn. If you are not feared, you will be ignored. The Stoics knew this too, Wicks. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Obedience, when given unthinkingly, puts your mind in someone else's hands. You act, not from clarity, but from fear. You live, not from choice, but from habit. And that's not strength. That's a slow form of death. Because when your identity is built on pleasing others, you never get to know who you are when you stop. You've traded freedom for favor, and favor is fleeting. But here's the shift. When you begin to move not from approval, but from principle, when your yes means something, because your no is just as firm, that's when you stop being a servant and start becoming a force. The world doesn't remember the man who obeys every rule. It remembers the one who rewrites them, who sets a boundary and holds it, who walks away rather than be used. You want to be respected. Then stop making obedience your brand. Let your silence carry weight. Let your presence have terms. Let people feel that you are not someone they can summon at will. Obedience might keep you in the room, but sovereignty is what makes you unforgettable. Part 3. The wolf moves in silence, not desperation. You've seen it before. Maybe you've even been there yourself. The man who tries too hard, who explains too much, who reacts too quickly. He calls it passion. He believes it's strength. But in truth, it's desperation. And desperation never commands respect. Because when you move from fear, your steps are loud, hesitant, predictable. But when you move from conviction, from calm, focused inner power, you don't need to announce yourself. You become like the wolf, silent, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Never announce your moves before they're made. That's not just strategy, that's survival. And no one knew it better than Machiavelli. He warned against the man who shows his heart too easily, who wears his emotions as proof of honesty. Because the man who reveals everything too soon becomes a map for others to navigate and then manipulate. The wolf is different. He doesn't bark for attention. He doesn't chase noise. He waits, observes, measures the room. And when he strikes, it's not for show, it's for impact. Desperation is loud. Power is quiet. Most men believe they need to prove themselves in every room, every conversation, every relationship. But the ones who leave a lasting impression are rarely the loudest. They don't chase validation. They radiate certainty. They aren't hurried by the pace of others, because their timing is their weapon. Seneca once wrote, "A wise man is content with himself." And that contentment isn't passive, it's potent. It means you don't need the room to approve of you before you act. You don't require applause to know your value. You move in silence because your direction doesn't depend on the noise of others. Think about the last time you over-explained. The last time you tried to be seen, to be understood, to prove your point, and walked away feeling emptier. That's the echo of desperation. The wolf in you went quiet, and the dog stepped forward. But the wolf, he moves with economy, no wasted motion, no wasted words. His silence is not weakness, it's strategy. His stillness is not fear, it's focus. And when he does speak, people listen. Not because he demands attention, but because his presence already claimed it. There is a kind of man who speaks little but is always heard, who enters a room and shifts its energy without saying a word. That's not a performance. That's mastery. That's what happens when you build your life around internal power, not external approval. The Stoics knew this truth well. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because the moment you stop defending your ego, you free yourself from needing to be understood. And in that freedom, you gain space to observe, to choose, to act with clarity instead of noise. That's the wolf's advantage. He's not distracted by needing to be liked. He doesn't beg, he doesn't boast. He stays still until stillness becomes uncomfortable for everyone else. And then he acts, not from emotion, not from panic, but from strategy, from silence. So ask yourself, are your actions coming from power or from panic? If you're always explaining, always justifying, always chasing, pause, breathe, that's not you. That's the leash. Start cutting it. Because when you can walk into a room without needing to be seen and still be felt, you've tapped into something most men never touch. You've stepped into the mind of the wolf, and the world listens. When the wolf finally speaks. Part 4. Appear calm. Remain dangerous. There is a quiet kind of power, one that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't beg to be understood, and doesn't swing wildly to be taken seriously. It sits. It watches, it waits, and when it moves, it does so with the certainty of a man who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. That's the kind of man you're meant to become. Appear calm, remain dangerous. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Machiavelli's words echo in every negotiation, every confrontation, every room where power is not given but taken. To be feared does not mean to be cruel, it means to be respected. To be someone who cannot be pushed, who cannot be provoked into foolishness, who does not flinch in the face of chaos. The dog barks to feel strong. The wolf stays quiet because he already is, and so must you. You don't need to raise your voice when your presence is enough. You don't need to list your achievements when your energy already speaks them. True power is not loud. It's composed, and in that stillness is something deeply unnerving to those who rely on noise to feel important. The Stoics understood this better than most. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." What he meant was, do not stoop, do not lash out like those who live in chaos. Let them rage. Let them unravel. You instead stay centered. The man who remains unshaken, even when shaken, is the one who commands the room. But here's the secret that most people don't tell you. Calm is not natural, it's trained. It is forged in disappointment, refined through betrayal, and solidified in solitude. Calmness is not the absence of intensity, it is its control. And underneath that calm exterior must live something dangerous. Something sharp, not reckless, but capable. Because if you are calm without being capable, you're not grounded, you're harmless. It's not enough to be still. You must be still and ready, still and armed, still and willing. That is what Machiavelli meant when he said, "A prince must learn how not to be good when the situation demands it." This doesn't mean becoming immoral. It means being prepared to do what must be done when comfort is no longer an option. So ask yourself, do you only appear calm because you're afraid to engage, or do you possess the strength to act, but choose when? There's a world of difference between the two. One is weakness, masked as composure. The other is danger dressed in stillness. You must become a man who speaks softly because he knows what would happen if he raised his voice. A man who lets others boast because he knows he doesn't need to. A man who can walk into conflict and not crumble because he's met himself in silence and mastered the storm within. That kind of calm is magnetic. It's felt in the bones of those who stand across from you. They sense it, not because you threaten them, but because they know you could, and you won't hesitate if the moment demands it. That is what separates the remembered from the forgotten, the predator from the prey. And in a world where everyone is screaming for validation, the one who walks in silence and owns it will always be feared. Always be respected and never be ignored, so become the calm in the storm. But never forget the storm lives in you. Part 5. Loyalty must be conditional, never blind. Loyalty sounds noble. It's praised in speeches, romanticized in stories, and taught like a sacred virtue. But here's the truth most won't say out loud. Loyalty, when given blindly, is not a strength. It's a leash. You were taught to stand by people, to serve a cause, to never abandon ship. But the world you walk in today doesn't reward loyalty. It expects it, and once you've given it without condition, it becomes your cage. You stop thinking. You stop questioning. You stop choosing. And without choice, there is no freedom. He who is loyal without judgment is already conquered, Machiavelli might have whispered if he lived today. When you tie your identity to loyalty, you risk losing yourself the moment the person, place, or ideal you're loyal to changes, because it will. People evolve, institutions rot, movements drift. And if your loyalty is unconditional, you go down with them, not out of honor, but out of inertia. Let me ask you this. If the person you're loyal to would not risk for you what you risk for them, is that loyalty, or is that self-betrayal? Many men confuse obedience for integrity. They stay in jobs that drain them, in relationships that deplete them, in groups that no longer serve them, because they made a promise, but a promise that destroys you is a contract you must learn to break. Loyalty is not submission. Loyalty is strategy. You offer it to those who earn it. You extend it where mutual respect exists. And when that contract is violated, you walk, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Seneca once wrote, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." That includes walking away from loyalty that poisons your purpose. That means choosing your mission over your need to belong. Because the wolf rises not by serving every master, but by choosing where his strength is best honored. Remember this: the weak offer loyalty like a gift. The wise offer it like a loan. It has terms, it requires interest, and it can be revoked the moment it is no longer respected. Look at the history books. The loyal soldier is remembered in a paragraph. The calculating leader who knew when to shift course. He wrote chapters. You don't owe your future to who you were loyal to yesterday. You owe your future to the man you're becoming today. So if you're holding on to something out of guilt, out of fear, out of old definitions of virtue, let go. Your allegiance belongs not to sentiment, but to principle. And that principle should always include self-respect. When you live like the wolf, your loyalty is your weapon, not your collar. And you never hand it over blindly. You give it with eyes open. And you take it back when necessary. That's not betrayal, that's sovereignty. Part 6. Fear is more durable than love. Most men spend their lives trying to be loved. They soften their voice, dilute their truth, and aim to please. But what they fail to see is this: love is a flame, and flames flicker. Fear is a shadow. It lingers. Machiavelli understood something that still unsettles the modern mind. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Not because fear is evil, but because fear is reliable. Love is emotional. It requires upkeep. One wrong word, one failed expectation, and it collapses. It demands performance, sacrifices, and perfection. But fear survives missteps. Fear lingers even when the heart cools. It keeps distance. It demands respect. It says, "You may not like me, but you won't cross me. Why is this so hard to accept?" Because we were taught to seek comfort over consequence, to think that being liked is being safe. But history and real life show the opposite. The boss who everyone liked but no one respected, forgotten. The man who bent backwards to please, replaced. But the one who drew lines, who stood firm, who could say no without shaking, he was feared. And he was remembered. Fear is not cruelty, it is clarity. It means you know where your boundaries are. It means you do not offer unlimited access. It means when people deal with you, they measure their words. They check their intentions, because there is weight behind your stillness. Seneca said, "He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a man who is alive." In the same way, he who fears being disliked will never do anything worthy of a man who is respected. You don't need to be loud, you don't need to be violent, but you do need to be felt. When your presence enters the room, it should carry a quiet intensity, the knowledge that you do not beg, do not apologize unnecessarily, do not tolerate disrespect. Fear sharpens memory. Most people forget kind words, but they never forget the man who stood tall when others begged, who acted with force when others hesitated, who didn't flinch when he was tested. You want to build real power? Stop trying to be understood by everyone. Start becoming unshakable. Let love come if it comes. Let admiration arrive when earned. But build your foundation on something deeper, on a strength that does not need applause to act. Be kind. But let your kindness be a choice, not a weakness. Be loving, but let your love be guarded, never exploited. And above all, be feared, not for your anger, but for your silence, not for your cruelty, but for your clarity. Because in a world that respects only what it cannot control, the man who commands fear with dignity is the man who commands everything. Part 7. Your rise begins with solitude. There is a quiet moment that precedes every rise, a space where noise fades, praise disappears, and only you remain, alone. This is solitude, and it is not loneliness. It is the beginning of your transformation. Most men run from solitude. They fill their days with distractions, their nights with noise, and their hearts with empty validation. But the wolf thrives in solitude, because in that space you are no longer who the world told you to be. You are free to become who you truly are. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And self-mastery is born in silence, not applause. It is forged not in the presence of others, but in your ability to stand alone and not tremble. This is where the weak dog dies. The part of you that seeks approval, that waits for permission, that apologizes for existing, that part cannot survive in solitude, because solitude shows you the truth, not who you pretend to be, but who you are when no one is watching. Let me ask you, when was the last time you sat with your own mind and didn't run from it? When was the last time you moved without needing someone to validate the path? Every man who has ever risen, in war, in business, in philosophy, has faced this crucible. It is the place where you are forced to confront what you fear most, your own potential, not because it is lacking, but because deep down, you know it demands more from you. Solitude strips away the masks. It removes the role you play for society, for family, for friends. It shows you what is weak, what is broken, and what must be rebuilt. It is not a punishment. It is preparation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In solitude, you choose the color. You choose whether your mind becomes a prison or a throne. So don't fear the silence. Don't rush to fill the space. Let it echo. Let it challenge you, because what you build in solitude becomes the foundation of your sovereignty. A man who rises in solitude does not need to bark. He does not need to announce his return. When he walks back into the world feels it. Your rise doesn't start when they recognize you. It begins when you no longer need to be recognized. That's when the dog dies. That's when the wolf rises. Not loud, but undeniable. Conclusion. You've come this far because something inside you refuses to stay leashed. You're done wagging your tail for approval. You're tired of apologizing for your power, for dimming your fire just to be accepted. And maybe, just maybe, you've realized that the man you've been pretending to be was never the man you were meant to become. What Machiavelli revealed is not a call to cruelty, it's a call to clarity. It's not about domination, it's about sovereignty, about reclaiming the parts of yourself you buried to survive in a world that rewards obedience but secretly fears independence. The weak dog dies the moment you decide to stop living for permission. The wolf rises the moment you stop asking and start becoming. From now on, speak less and mean more. Move slowly but strike with certainty. Give your loyalty with terms, not tears, and above all, do not fear being feared. Fear is not the enemy of respect. It is its foundation. Remember what Marcus Aurelius once said, "The only wealth which you will keep forever is the wealth you have given away." And in this case, that wealth is strength, the silent kind, the kind that's built in solitude, the kind that doesn't seek to be liked, but demands to be remembered. So now I ask you, if this message lit a fire in your chest, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the Stoic Philosophy, where we don't chase applause, we pursue mastery. Here, you won't be told to be soft for the sake of comfort. You'll be reminded of your edge, your silence, your strength. Leave a comment below. Share your story, your fire, your turning point. You never know who might read it and awaken their own wolf. And most of all, walk differently from this day forward. You've heard the call, now rise, quietly, powerfully, like the wolf you were always meant to be.